Today's release of the 5-year-old CIA interrogation report could spark Attorney General Eric Holder into a corner by prompting him to investigate CIA employees and contractors. But President Obama has made clear that it is his desire to look ahead instead of getting bogged down by possible criminal investigations. So let's bring in NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams and also Mark Mazzetti, national security correspondent with the New York Times. Pete, does this put Eric Holder in a bind? The Ethics Office, the Office of Professional Responsibility, we expect from the Justice Department, is going to recommend that there should be prosecutions. I interviewed Bob Baer earlier, and he said not fair just to do the small fry, that you need to do the bigger people, as Jamil Jaffer also said, the ACLU lawyer. So how do they decide who to go after and whether it is fair?
Well, I don't think so, because here's on terms of a bind, and here's I think there's a little misunderstanding among some folks about what this would be. What we've always understood, what the Justice Department was looking at in terms of the actual questioning of the detainees, the most seriously abusive cases, those would be a small number of cases, maybe somewhere between, say, 10 and 20, something along that magnitude, of the people who actually carried them out. And the point would be that they went way beyond what the authorization was at the time. Now, there's a separate question about whether people who authorized these interrogation methods, the lawyers at Justice who worked on the memos at the time, should be subject to some kind of an investigation. That's what the OPR, that's what the Office of Professional Responsibility has suggested to the Attorney General. So they're somewhat separate, although it does sort of answer the mail on what your guests are saying, that it shouldn't just be the low-level people. But in any event, it doesn't appear that it's going to be the Attorney General, the White House counsel, the Vice President, the Director of the CIA, anyone that high up, which will not satisfy some members of Congress. But I would be very surprised, Andrea, if the Attorney General does not appoint a prosecutor.
Even though there was certainly a lot of signaling from the president himself that he didn't want to go down that road, he did say that it would be up to Eric Holder. Mark Mazzetti, at this stage, what about those Cheney memos? We apparently are going to see those this afternoon. The vice president said memorably in an AAI speech in May that those memos would prove that there were definite benefits from the, quote, enhanced interrogation techniques. What is your best understanding as to what we're going to see in these Cheney memos now that they're finally coming out?
Well, my understanding is that the Cheney memos are going to sort of lay out exactly at what point did these enhanced interrogation methods, these harsher methods, actually produce information that then led to other tips. President Bush and Vice President Cheney have said often that the first CIA detainee, Abu Zubaydah, didn't start talking until the CIA started using these harsher methods. And then President Bush has publicly laid out, you know, from there they then moved on to other tips, and that led to something else. And so there was a sort of succession of as they put it, successes on the intelligence front that came from these harsher methods.
Ann Kornbluth joining us now from the Washington Post, and you've been breaking the stories about the special unit that's going to be set up in the White House that they have confirmed now today is going to be running this. The FBI is going to be the central manager of it. The policy will come from the White House. What does this do to the CIA?
Well, it's a good question. The White House has insisted, senior Obama administration officials have insisted this is not meant as a slap at the CIA, that they're going to be actively involved. The number 2 person at this new unit with the acronym HIG is for High Value Detainee Interrogation Group. It's a mouthful. But that the number 2 person at this group will be from the intelligence community, so presumably someone from the CIA. But there's sort of no way to interpret it as other than moving it sort of the center of gravity when it comes to interrogation away from the CIA, putting it under the direct auspices of the White House and of the FBI.
Pete, one of the other new policies is about rendition. They're no longer going to send suspects, terrorist suspects, for interrogation in countries where, with a wink and a nod, the U.S. knew all along that they would be tortured. They will at least rely on what the country in question will tell us regarding their intentions regarding the suspects. Will this make a big difference?
Well, you know, that's sort of been what the Bush administration said it was going to do. Now the Obama people say that, number one, we'll ask the State Department to verify what the countries, how the countries represent their treatment of detainees, and secondly, that they'll have some sort of monitoring process to see whether the countries are really keeping their promises and not subjecting these folks that are sent back to their home countries or elsewhere to abuse. I guess that sort of begs the question of, well, what if we find out they are? We can't probably get the people out of there. I guess it means we wouldn't send anyone else to those countries. But yes, that would be something of a change.
And regarding the January 22nd executive order, they're now reaffirming that the Army Field Manual, Mark Mazzetti, is what is going to be used. This is a dispute that goes all the way back into the Bush years. Colin Powell, John McCain argued that the Army Field Manual was the proper guideline. We know what happened with the very different guidelines that were written from the Justice Department and from the White House counsel's office in the Bush White House. But now this makes it official. No exceptions, no waivers. The Army Field Manual is going to be the rule of law. Yeah,
that's right. Since the beginning of the Obama administration, top officials had at least seemed to open the door, leave the door open for additional techniques, not waterboarding, but additional techniques beyond the Army Field Manual that they might approve, even in times of crisis. What that seems to be happening today is they are saying, without any hesitation, without any carve-outs, they are going to rely on the Army Field Manual.
Ann Kornbluth, do you think that this is going to be a clear path ahead, or is the Obama administration still going to face a lot of political crossfire, a lot of criticism that it's not being tough enough on terror, especially coming from its predecessors?
They're hoping it's a clear path ahead. They'd like this to be forward-looking. They've been saying that all along, but combined with the reports that are coming out today and the criticism they're facing, and God forbid if something else were to happen, which of course has been the question looming over this all along, I think it's inescapable that they're still going to be talking about what their predecessors did and their decisions to alter that policy.
Ann Kornbluth, Mark Mazzetti, and Pete Williams, get out your reading glasses. We are expecting thousands of pages within the next few hours, and we're all going to be crunching through it. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks.